Good morning. Welcome to the Connector Podcast. I'm excited to have you back again today because joining me is Matt Hamrin, Senior Counselor at MorganMyers, a food and agriculture marketing firm right here in the Midwest with clients globally.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great to have you. Matt, you're a certifiable connector, and it's the Connector Podcast. One way to get into your psyche is to ask you and kick things off today. What's music is in your playlist currently?
I'm pretty simple. The same stuff I listened to in college. It hasn't evolved too much. I mean, there's some stuff that'll mix in, but mostly your Pearl Jam, your U2, your Bob Marley, all those traditional things. Nothing too exotic.
Yeah, we were talking the other day, and there's one more you left out, like Smashing Pumpkins, some
Sure.
Billy Corgan. For me, what's funny is I follow all the bands, as you say, that we used to listen to, but what are they doing currently?
Right.
That Billy Corgan young man continues to just put out album after album.
He
Great
really
stuff.
does. And funny you should mention, I was just reading an article about them the other day and the challenges they have within the band and the dynamics and kind of the changing lineup over the years. But yeah.
It's mostly him.
Right.
But
right.
But his literal solo albums. Good,
Sure.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
All right, Matt, your LinkedIn bio defines your title, I think, really well, your role really well. I'm a trusted advisor who creates and delivers compelling communication strategies, programs, and content to build trust and strengthen stakeholder relationships. I like that very much. And I can tell you out there, this is what Matt does. But let's get into a little bit more of how you do that. Take us back. We've gotten a chance to work together.
A few times, yes.
Yeah, pretty cool. Just as a little foundation,
Yeah.
do you remember meeting the first time or that era?
Yeah. I mean, you've become accustomed to receiving those panic calls from me when I'm kind of in a pinch and need some real creative powerhouse help. And this was a particularly challenging situation. We had a global client that was doing some anti-child labor and forced labor work, and it had to do with creating kind of a universal way to show these behaviors and things like that, and we were just struggling mightily with the whole process. And I came to you, sat down, and had this very cathartic dialogue session with you. I should have been laying on a couch and talked to a therapist, but you listened, and you listened to me blather and ramble as my brain does. And then you turned and said, well, maybe this. And I remember you started drawing out what would become a very accurate rendition of the final poster and the way the graphics played it out. And I said, yes, that's it. And then from there, we just took out the chisel and hammers and kind of took the rough edges off of it. And it was just one of those really fun collaborative experiences.
Thank you. Yeah, that is so great to reflect on. Matt, too, to back up right before that, and I did this on my previous podcast, what set us up to meet was that one or two rare times in my life where my banker said, you ought to meet,
Right.
and played Connector. And so we got together that way, and that was a really special project. And there was a string of things.
Yeah.
Matt, you gave me, thank you, that was a very nice recollection as well, but you gave me one of my favorite compliments I've ever gotten in my life about month 4 of a few projects in our relationship. And you said it this way. Let me see how you said it. You said to your leadership there, you said, I'm just waiting for him to do a stinky.
Yeah, right.
And it was that we had a series of successes together.
Yeah.
And we kept that going. So
Yeah.
Thank you. That was just a funny way that you said that. And
Oh, yeah.
It was my goal to not lay a stinky.
Right, and that's kind of the trick. You wait for the other shoe to drop. Because people make mistakes. People have bad days, and you have to be open to that, and you have to be knees flexed and ready to pivot and deal with it.
It's nice to know you were waiting for that.
I call those weekdays when I have the stinkies, as it were.
Well, Matt, you have a really unique position, I think, at MorganMyers. And as I've observed your role, and you're dealing with clients, you're dealing with the PM and account teams. For me, with you, I admire that you're able to see a situation, a need,
Right.
And tee up for those involved. What's the situation? What's the goal at hand? and really conduct a roundtable
Sure.
with those entities. And even from something you were telling me this morning as you were fielding a couple texts and things like that, could you reflect for me and the audience on your role at the roundtable?
Right. So, what we do in many ways is to have a client come to us with a challenge, and they feel like communications is a part of the solution. So we need to help them figure out what they need to say in terms of the messages, how they need to say it to people in terms of strategies and tactics, and who to say it to or the audience is to make that which they want to have happen. So I often act as the bridge between the creative team and the account side, often playing on both sides of the fence, which is always fun. But my job is to come in and set the table most efficiently, because time is money to us and how we do what we do. And so I need to coalesce that information into a clear, whether it's a creative brief or just a brainstorming session, but I liken it to putting the chess pieces out on the board for everyone. So everyone knows what's important, how things are going to work. And then bring people into the fold and elicit their input and feedback and kind of bring guardrails as we go along. And it can be challenging because everyone thinks differently. I didn't always realize that everyone thinks differently. And so it can get very interesting very quickly as you try and get to a solution.
Yeah, this is that piece of EQ that I seem to touch on a lot daily here and then with guests or just in conversation. And I think what you've just described perfectly is EQ in its sense of things is like empathy for each of the players at the table, right. and you've seen their gifts. Well, that's why they're with you, and it's funny that in the metaphor of the round table, you say I'm setting it. I'm setting the table. Sure. But anyway, to the use of all those gifts, and again, I've seen it time and again. Let's dig just a little bit further at you're much more than the table setter to me.
Right.
There's times where I would feel like the whiteboarding that you described of me is you. So there's solutions that you're both corralling the ideas of others, but you're bringing in a great deal of brainstorm and solution. Yeah. Where do you maybe define the line of having the group, come to a certain realization, and where your contributions,
right,
even as the table setter, offer solutions?
Yeah, I think all the input that we can receive from the client or from research and getting background on any effort is they're kind of, I liken it also, and I often do this with these analogies that make sense in my head, maybe not others, but ingredients, right? And we're going to make a dish. We're going to make 10 different dishes, and we're going to choose which is the best one. And so you want to set the table and share the ingredients, and then have everyone kind of look at it differently. And I'm going to have my interpretation, and I may begin by saying, what about this, right? And then someone would say, well, the client's allergic to cumin, so we really shouldn't do that. And I'm like, okay, cool, throw that out of the way, because again, efficiency. Brainstorming is great, and you want to have it all be open, and sometimes it's challenging because I'll thin slice and go quickly to a solution or what I think is the solution, and you need to let everyone else breathe because not everyone, like we talked about, thinks the same way. Every person is different, and so giving them time to kind of reflect on those ingredients and get creative and come back with a solution that's going to really not only delight the client, but accomplish what they're looking to do in the marketplace, if that makes sense.
It does, and it's so great, Matt. I love the analogy, the metaphor there of the ingredients, because we know that in the metaphor, if we gave the ingredients to 3 different chefs, you would get very different experiences there too. You said as thin slice a solution, and that's one thing I keenly am aware of. I like to also foster the creativity at the table, but as you see, maybe a group will want to gravitate towards a solution. And a real good one too. And I'll say, can we park that one?
Yeah.
Because if we all pile into that one, then there's not going to be these other variety. And clients want options, and we need to test some of those. And very great. Thank you for bringing it up. So I wanted to also dig into, Matt, more than just the projects. I've seen you really lend strategic vision and leadership at the company. And I'm super impressed with your leadership and how you interact with them. Could you reflect a little bit about how you see yourself there at Morgan & when it is, literally that of strategic vision for the company?
Yeah, I think that there's a time when we were doing all sorts of different verticals and so on and so forth, and we really kind of doubled down with conscious, forethought into the food and agriculture space, because we saw, and this was like 10 years ago, we saw the evolving relationship that people have with their food, with where it comes from, with what's in it, with what it does to their body, what it does to their families' bodies, and the proliferation of misinformation, disinformation, confusion. And I found it, and still to this very day find it fascinating, the way people reconcile what they put in their bodies, and how some people wear what they put in their bodies as a brand on their sleeve, as a badge of honor, and others couldn't give it a second thought. And so you have this really wild spectrum of individuals or of people that have this weird relationship with their food, and just being in that space to me is something that I'm passionate about. Yeah. And I think that the organization is passionate about, and it goes all the way back to the farm to the table. It's trite and cliche as that may sound, that's the spectrum that we're kind of operating heavily in. That doesn't mean that we don't work with other folks outside of that, like manufacturing companies will bring us in because we're offering an independent perspective that's reflective of that nuanced relationship people have with a product, and they want a fresh perspective and not just the same old that they may be getting from their people that serve their particular vertical, right? Yeah. And those are really fun. I mean, as you well know, the ideation and the creativity and the working at it is the fun.
Yeah, and it can be applied to other verticals, and it's fun to bring a different perspective from time to time. Key word in some of that, thank you, was the evolving, of the relationship with food. We had quite an evolution, to say, of the last couple of years. Yeah. And so in the marketing and communications for food and agriculture, coming out of 2020 and into 21, tell us a little bit what life has been like, how things stopped, and some of the new activities that you've been in. Yeah, I mean,
the thing with food is it's not going away. We all need it to survive, so there's hard to get around it. But you had this incredible shift. I mean, imagine food service just shutting down, right? The ketchup bottle on the table is now a weapon of mass destruction, conceivably, right, by passing along these germs. And people learning to cook at home, working on some programs, just helping people get better at that. We have a generation of kids who can't boil water. And that's terrifying to me, because they should be armed with the confidence and comfort in a kitchen. A lot of alliteration there. And so I think there's a responsibility for people in that space to help people with that, but also to continue to put product on the shelf. Some of our clients, just working around the clock. And we were just out last week in Dallas on a tour, sampling some products at retail. And we had done that during COVID, which was fascinating. Wow. And people loved that kind of step towards normalcy. And we had a lot of protocols and safety things that we had to take care of, but it was great to see the retailers be open to that. But last week in Dallas, we were at some of the plants that manufacture food for these clients. And we brought in the food truck, and we brought in the van, and had a little party for the workers. And these are the people who, putting their, for lack of a better description, putting their life on the lines to go into that manufacturing facility every day and make the food that's going to keep our country and our world alive. And so it's to answer your question, I think it didn't really stop for them. It stopped in certain spaces, but they had to pivot and redirect very quickly. And the folks that I work with are just hell-bent on, or were and are hell-bent on keeping their employees safe. And it was cool to see organizations step up and do the right things, and being, ringside to see that was fascinating.
When I finally got a hold of Wichita, we could do guerrilla sampling as long as our vehicle is food safe compliant.
Are we food safe compliant?
Yes.
Okay. That's great news, Jake.
That's good.
I really appreciate it. Texas was great. The kids are awesome. Amber's a rock star, and Tim is just, a walking tour de force of effort. And so, yeah, it really went well. Client was very, very happy. The facilities were very, very pleased. So,
For sure. No, that's great to hear.
hey, do you know Jim Tor?
CI Design.
Yeah.
I'm sitting across from him right now recording a podcast.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Hey, Jake.
How are you, sir?
Good.
He called you a real jerk.
Yeah.
That sounds like him, doesn't it?
I was just saying, I've been known to do that, for sure.
All right, we're going to get back to it, okay?
Sounds good, sir. If you guys need anything, give me a holler, okay?
All right, love you.
Love you too. Bye.
Bye-bye. I love busting out the love you to clients from time to time. And I was going to get into that earlier. Is about, in what we do, it's as much about, like, competency and talent is table stakes for what we're paid. But we have an obligation to your point, when they cued this for me, is the empathy. To get to know our clients in a way that we know what makes them tick. It's going to allow you to do a better job of creating creative that's going to move them, that's going to get them excited. And it's not just, what we do is not fast food. It's not, quick serve. It's not, order something off the menu. It's all custom cabinetry. It's all high-end cuisine.
Yeah.
And I just think that sometimes that gets lost in the wayside. And to your point of the empathy of understanding what motivates people, what people's passions are. And the more you know that about your team, the more you know that about the client, the better results you're going to get across the board.
Yeah. Matt, and I've seen you're this ambassador then for both sides of it, because you've been on the call, you've been in the other country.
Right.
Now coming back with this intel and the fabric of what needs to be done, the story that needs to be told, and then come back around and delight the customer.
Right.
But create a nice experience and create meaningful movement at MorganMyers.
Yeah, it is, and it took me a while to understand that my position there is unique from the standpoint that strategy and then creative, right? That I can actually do both and bridge the gap in conversation, which I didn't realize that everyone couldn't do. And you were able to do this as well. And I think we've talked about this in the past. And that becomes invaluable because you can play on both sides of that. It's not just passing the information along and having them get it. You can get creative. I can't draw, as you've seen, my drunken chicken scratches. But in terms of coming up with creative solutions and ideas for tactics and strategies and things like that, to be able to do that is a lot of fun.
Yeah, interesting. And there is a parallel. Matt and I are both ENFPs, to whatever that means to you, audience. But there's a way that I get you, man. Mm-hmm. But I get you in a way that I appreciate so much. The lapse of that your brain is running. Right. For the empathy piece, but there's so much IQ in you too, in this food space, particularly. It's really interesting. If the podcast audience can tell, we took a cut here so Matt could take a phone call, and let's dig in just a little bit. You were answering a critical question this morning, on compliance in this day and age, right, for samplings and food trucks. Just tell us a little bit that you can say. We'll cut out all the brand names.
When you're trying to get all these things scheduled, it is literally so many moving parts. And say we're taking samples out to a retail location, which is, when you get right down to it, if you want to drive adoption of a product, put it in their mouths, right? Because especially if it's a new product, right? You want to get them to taste it. You want to give them a coupon. You want to get them where they're thinking about food. So we're going on these retail banners, as we call it in this space. And everyone is different. I mean, the tour last year during COVID, we'd have a place call 2 days beforehand and tell us, you can't come. Or, we had to quarantine our tour teams for 2 weeks ahead of time. We had to not go into Chicago because we weren't allowed there. Mm-hmm. There's food permitting, right? The call I just got was for, next Monday in Wichita, where the client's like, we're going to go here and we're going to go here. But in between, we want to do something, so do we go to a Walmart, or do we just, the client will say, we'll just go stop on the street at this park. And it's like, it doesn't really work that way. And so I got that call from our tour partner who manages the field teams and the trucks and so forth. And, he was great. He went and talked to the food and health inspector on the ground. So again, it's this everything we've talked about has been about a team of people. That's the trick, to be in a band where everyone plays a different instrument. Billy Corrigan, he on a lot of the records, he's playing all the instruments, and they're just kind of session musicians that go on stage and do these things or whatever. I want to be in a band where I look at the person playing the other instrument and I'm in awe, as I was when you created live jam session in front of me on that global project in 53 countries or whatever. To see you do that on the fly is what's truly inspirational. And to work with people that you respect, and you respect the different things that they can do. That's the key, I think, to successful collaboration, is looking at that other person, and a marriage, looking at the other person and being amazed by what they do that you can't do. That makes everything better.
Yeah. Audience, when Matt took this call, what a really, really neat thing, as he reflected on how the engagement in Dallas of last week went. He called out, 3 of the teammates saying how great they were. What a rock star.
I didn't realize that. Yeah.
You did, and I love that. I love that. These are some people at the top of their form.
Yeah. They're a tour team. They're going city to city. They've been on the road for a month, and I couldn't do that. The other person in the vehicles with me would be at risk. I would just go bananas, right? Mentally and physically, of course. But, and I look at them and I'm like, dude, nice to witness them in action, hustling, doing, setting up, solving problems on the fly. Witnessing that just builds incredible trust. And we've talked about that in the past. When you're in that band with those people, you got to trust them, because there are going to be times you're going to be in front of a client and you're going to be doing it without a net. And that's a lot of trust, because those clients are your babies. You want to take care of them. You want them to grow. You want them to be strong. You want them to be happy and delighted. And that's the gig, not just doing the work, but having everyone enjoy it and have you enjoy it too. That, I think, it's huge for me. That's why I solve these riddles all the time.
Yeah, I think it's so great, your gratitude for the team and knowing what you got there.
And I think that, and we've talked about this in the past, and sorry to interrupt, but self-deprecation plays a huge role in that. Like, I'll just be making jokes about myself all the time, because, you can do that if you're out there actually doing the thing that you're supposed to do, and other people are like, But, no one likes the person who's in there, I have all the answers. No, you don't. And we all know you don't. Stop saying that. It's frustrating. And so that's part of that kind of combustible process. Creativity.
Yeah, and I've been with you. When we're figuring it out together, we don't always have to say, I've got all the answers.
There was, and I want to tell a real quick story about working with you, where we were under pressure for these PowerPoints that were going to be shown, these training PowerPoints. And I'm up in your main conference room, and it was a hot summer day, and we're just banging through this stuff, and I'm attempting to make things look pretty, which is so inappropriate for me to be doing. And I was doing is a radius corner or radial corner on and I was...
Yes.
And I was making all these pictures, like kind of these rounded edges. You looked at me and you go, listen, I'll be honest with you. You're going a little happy-go-Jackie right now on the radius circles or the radius edges. And I'm like, I just put my head down. I'm like, just understand your limitations, Matt. Understand your limitations. You're going to do a lot better. I'll never forget that. That was really one of the funniest things, happy-go-Jackie on it. And I realized that I was going ape junk on it.
Everything.
Right, there's everything. It was just, that was going to be my great solution to the problem was, or just make everything have rounded edges. And you're like,
and
wow,
it's better.
This is unfortunate to witness.
Well, we've covered a lot, and I think that I'd rather leave people with some potent content here instead of go real long. I do think of the whiteboard sessions with you, Matt, and to fill up the corners of the whiteboard is something that I see you doing. And I think it's a picture inside your brain.
Oh, yeah.
It says, I'm going to go, let's cover all the territories before we narrow down. So I just want to give you that as, I'd say of the title we read, I do think of you as a creative director in there too. And that's something I really admire. I learned from you in doing that.
Well, I didn't realize that everyone didn't, A, think that way. B, I've been in front of clients, you start whiteboarding out the different parts of the conversation, the inputs we have. What do we know? Like, what are the ground rules that we have? So that spatially, to your point, this is a different kind of connector, but how do you make those connections? How do you make 1 + 1 = 5? And to at least have the ingredients on the board, to me, that just, it illuminates it almost, and it comes off the board, and you start to see where you should kind of head. And then, of course, someone will look at me and be like, yeah, but you're missing this part of the board because you had blinders on. You're so excited about this part. And clients really seem to enjoy that when you put it up. You put the world up there and they start to see it. And they're like, yeah, that is the big picture.
Yeah, great point that you're inviting somebody to show you a blind spot. Oh, Matt, you didn't cover this. So like I enjoy about you that you're showing us a picture of your brain, brain mapping the situation, some recon that you've done, but also these ideas and these channels, and then judge it,
and then let everyone else fill in.
Yeah.
Like I'll put down what I know. Let's put in these. Let's have the client say, yeah, but this and this organization that we work with, or this reality of our team members, or this, and you start to fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, everyone's part of the band, populating this whiteboard. And then sometimes you have to take a break because you need to let some people go away with that picture because they don't think like that. They want to take some time with it and ruminate. And that's part of that process. You have to be respectful of all the team members, how they think, I think.
So good. Yeah. I think the audience is getting a glimpse and just why I celebrate you too. The synapses, that fire for you, like oftentimes I'm in the floor laughing because of like the ways that your brain fires. Yeah, and it's been a joy to work with you and have you back.
It can be stressful though when there are when your brain spins up a lot. It can create anxiety and that's okay. You have to calm down and deal with it.
Sometimes people a little off balance. Oh, we're going there now.
Or especially if it's client or even a coworker, a collaborator, a partner that's not used to that. Like, what is this guy's deal? Are we okay here? And it's good. Just let him go for a while.
I think harnessed, it can be this like place where you're saying the direction we've been headed in. I'm okay if it goes another way.
Right.
It really it can be harnessed for some real good. Well, I'm ready to kind of wind down a little bit today.
Sure.
One thing I thought I'd love you to plug your podcast.
Yeah. We do a very, very loose podcast with a bunch of friends.
Is it still going?
It is. Yeah. It's called The Monthly Train Wreck, and it's very much... Of course. The concept is ordinary people exploring extraordinary topics, and so just representing the everyman when you talk to a doomsday prepper or a manager of rock and roll bands or rock musicians or Olympians, and to have people just think through that and get exposed to their world and have us ask the questions they might ask.
Yeah, really cool. Otherwise, just on the professional front, where would someone get a hold of you?
Matt Hamrin, Hamrin. You can look me up on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. I would think. Just avoid the Facebook page because God only knows what's on there. But yeah, still on LinkedIn, or just look up MorganMyers, MorganMyers.com. And reach out through that, or mhamrin@morganmyers.com if anyone wants to talk or you have challenges that you think Jim and I might be able to help solve. You witnessed the circus firsthand.
We did, a little bit. This has been a pleasure. Thank you, Matt.
I appreciate you having me, Matt. It's just been a blast, for sure.
Thanks.